All right, I think we're now live. So this is a PM lesson live mock interview where I interview folks on product management interview questions, and we have some fun answering some common PM interview questions. I'm here today with Jen. Jen, do you want to just go ahead and introduce yourself to the folks tuning in?
Yeah, definitely. Hi, everyone. My name is Jen Lee, and Steve and I actually went to school together. So I went to Princeton University and graduated in 2017. And I was always into startups and tech and product. And after graduation, I actually moved out here to Seattle, Washington, and started as a PM at Microsoft, working on Azure Compute, which is a really cool cloud computing division of Microsoft. It's growing really quickly. And I've actually been super lucky, really found a great team and got a chance to really see several products already and features go out the door. So that's been a really great learning experience. So excited to be here, share my thoughts. I haven't done an actual PM interview myself in a while, but I've interviewed several people who've gotten positions around many different tech companies of all different sizes. So I'm happy to help out.
Cool. Yeah, I think it's really awesome to have sometimes folks come on that are still interviewing, but it's awesome to have, a real life Microsoft PM to interview, prep some of these questions and talk about how you might think about them. So it's really cool. And it's just awesome to have you get your take. So anything else before we kind of dive in, Jen?
No, so I guess me and Steven will be doing actual mock interview of an actual question, but at the end, I'm gonna kind of add in some of my top tips for all of you guys because I've seen people there's a lot of different ways to do a PM interview, and a lot of people read cracking the PM interview and definitely do that. But I think in order to stand out from the crowd, I have around 5 tips for you all. So you'll get that secret sauce for your next PM interview.
Cool. Awesome. And I just tweeted about it so people can tune in and people can watch in. We already have about 10 viewers right now. So let's get into it.
Right.
So the question that we wanted to ask about today was about designing a product that improves the experience of moving to a new city. Types, analytical types, technical, etc. But we want to focus on the product design elements and understanding how you might go about thinking about that. Any questions about that question before we just go ahead and get started?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in order to get started, I guess I have a few clarifying questions about your question. So there are a lot of different types of people who are always moving around the world. So to clarify, they're moving to an urban city, right, in the United States. And around what kind of life stage are they at? Are they new grads moving to a new city? Do they have families? Are they already established families, empty nesters, or even the elderly population, 65 plus?
So for the purpose, so great question. So we're trying to understand who we're designing for. For the purpose of this question, I'll let you kind of pick who you want to target and who you think is the most important segment to look into.
All right, cool. And then also on this question, what is the main thing that this company who wants to build this product, what do they all go after? What are their top KPIs?
Yeah, so I would say that engagement is an important KPI for this company. And so, we want people also to come out of this experience having overall a higher quality user experience. So if we could look at the before and the after of the experience of moving to a new city, we would want a market increase in user reported satisfaction and engagement with whatever service we're putting out there.
All right, awesome. Cool. So to get started, I'm gonna first talk about the different types of users that I'm thinking about. So first, there are new grads. So basically people in their early 20s who are moving to a new urban city, possibly to start a new job, and so on and so forth. Second is new families. So maybe they just got married, just starting to have kids. They're starting to build a life for themselves. So they're kind of trying to settle down and trying to start their roots and really put down roots in a brand new city. Third is the elderly population. I would say for this case, to kind of scope it down a little bit more, 65 plus. So these people are maybe snowbirds. They are empty nesting, their kids are all grown up, and they're looking for a fun place to retire and kind of live out the best years of their life, for sure. So to kind of recap, we were talking about 3 different types of users that we're thinking about. So the new grads, the new families, and the people new to retirement. So I think out of those 3, I feel like I'm especially have knowledge about the very first one, especially since I newly moved to a new city, so I would count myself as a user of this, and also have actually worked on a startup that targeted a similar user base, so I'll use some of those learnings in how I think about this particular product design. So I guess to kind of move forward, so to look at new grads, what they kind of care about and think about. When I was moving to a new city, you're usually coming and moving into a very urban city, and you might have just graduated from college. So there's a lot of things going on, and a lot of things you're not prepared for that you maybe didn't learn in school, and there's just a lot of logistical work. So basically, if I think about it, you can separate that out into several categories. First is finding housings. So basically where you can settle down your own roots and actually figure out where you're going to live, where you're going to stay, and where you're going to call home when you work in this new job. So I'm going to also assume that these new grads are moving to a new city to pursue like a new career, so on and so forth. Second, I feel like a lot of people think about their social life. So it's always daunting to move into a new city because you may know X number of people, and that X number could be 0 or a lot. And the experiences will vary throughout, depending on how clearly you feel at home in your new city. It's really easy to be isolated, so that's another thing that people always think about, and that's the emotional connect, I think. Third, I think another really critical thing is also logistical. There's a lot of, I guess, debt that you had and wherever you came from. So you probably had a family doctor. You probably had a dentist that you knew. You probably knew exactly where to go for certain things, such as like your bank, kind of all of those loose ends that a lot of people really don't want to take the time to figure out all the little bits and pieces. So I feel like those are kind of top 3 concerns that a new grad would have. So housing, social life, and all the boring logistical needs that they would have to deal with. Also, other things amongst this target market, it would be kind of what they care about. So I feel like I kind of mentioned that a little bit before, talking about the different things that they would want to optimize for, is that these are usually, if they're moving to an urban city, so you're probably thinking like New York, SF, LA, Seattle. Of course, there's many other cities around the US, but these are people who are moving to really discover the benefits of a city, really have a good time out of it, and also build their life from it. And also, on top of that, they're exploring. So they have a lot of disposable income, I'm assuming, especially since we're moving for a career, as we had made the assumption earlier. So that's also another thing to keep in mind. All right, so moving on from that, unless there are any questions about this particular user group.
Nope, great job structuring, and kind of I'm getting a sense of, so it sounds like we've gone through the segment of users that we're kind of focusing on, and then now we're talking about what their major issues are. So yeah, I would love to narrow down on what we're going to focus on and how we're going to think about it. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So I think one of the main things is that because you're in a new city, you really want to find a place you can call home. Like when they came from college, and that's where a lot of people consider their home away from home. And we want to be able to build that for these users in their new home away from home. Like I said, loneliness, feeling isolated, feeling antisocial are all different emotional connects that we want to make sure they keep top of mind here, as well as knowing that they have disposable income and kind of want to have fun and explore. So because of that, I'm actually going to tackle the housing need that we identified as number 1 as what we're going to build this product for. And the reason for that is that And you think about it, where people are, if they're not at work, their home base is where they live. That's where their friends can come over. This is also the point in people's lives where they start to entertain and host people. That's a kind of social activity that has really been popular, I feel like, ever since there's a lot of different ways to incorporate your friends in your life. So I think that's such a huge part of the time that people think about when they move into a new city. And also, you think about it, out of your income that you're spending on food, on travel, housing is a huge cost, unfortunately, and that's also another crisis that we can talk about. But that's going to be something where we can really tap into that disposable income that millennials and this generation, these new grads have. So they're paying quite a bit of rent in these cities that I identified earlier. So we want to be able to kind of see what chunk of the pie we can get from that as well. So we're going to go after this housing need that people have. So if we identify how people look for their search for housing right now is basically they go around and search for different apartments, and how actually I've seen it from firsthand experience here in Seattle. So I guess a pseudo user market study is people kind of look around, and the top thing that people pick, especially the people who have this disposable income, is that they look to move into apartment complexes. That's over houses, that's over condos, that's over finding a room in an existing house. And the reason for it is because apartment complexes have the amenities that these people with disposable income are looking for. So you don't have to worry about your mailbox, you don't have to worry about maintenance, because you don't have to go fix up your house yourself. You can just call someone. A lot of these apartment complexes have gyms and have different amenities that are really nice, and people with disposable income can afford that. So that's kind of what I've seen is really popular. But the thing that is missing here is kind of all the other parts that you need to have to go from a signed apartment to a thing that you can kind of turnkey, put your key in, walk in, and actually live in. So in the whole like apartment complex space, there's a lot of different products and startups that we can look at. We can look at helping millennials find apartments, actually find a place to live. We can look at the experience of enhancing how they put together their apartment. Or we can look at how they can save money in their apartment. And for me, I think I'm going to go and kind of target the second one. So how we can improve their experience of putting together their apartment. There are a lot of different products that kind of go after finding the apartment, and saving costs really varies between cities. And we want to be able to have this product scale across the United States. So in order to have that kind of vision, I think I'm going to go after the second one. So,
gotcha. And so to clarify, what stage are we in? So this is right after we've found a place and we've we know what we want, and then we're okay.
Yep. So you found a place. And so to recap, we're going after the new grads who are moving into a new city, and they are trying to figure out all of this housing problem. And basically they have found a place that they want to live, but where do they go from there? How do they go from finding and having a key to an empty place to a fully established home away from home lifestyle?
Gotcha. Cool.
Okay, cool. So basically from there, so I think we have the targeted problem and the targeted user scope. What do you actually want to build? So what I'm thinking is to put together your place, there are several different. Oh, also, sorry, one quick second. I actually need to charge my computer.
No problem. And just to jump in there also, I think what we've done so far is we've kind of gotten from a stage where we had a very amorphous problem, and we're kind of thinking about how do we actually even address, this very, very big problem. And it sounds like we've narrowed it down to kind of the segment of users as well as the segment of pain points that we're going to address, and really honed in on a specific particular pain point that is like the one that we're really going to focus on for the purpose of designing an actual product and fixing it. Yeah, no problem, Jen. I just filled in folks on like kind of how we would go about what we've done so far and what we're about to do. So If you're feeling, are you charged up? You're good?
1 second. Okay,
No
there
problem.
we go.
Cool.
All right, we're back.
Cool.
Okay, so basically where we left off, next is actually thinking about what product we're going to design and what features we actually want to think about. So there are different things in terms of putting together your apartment, but I identified the biggest thing and the biggest cost, and we want to keep that in mind as well, is kind of all the different, like basically your furniture, your cookware, your kitchen utensils, all the basically the nuts and bolts you need to live your life. So there are different ways that people furnish their apartment right now, right? Like you go to IKEA, you go to Wayfair, you try to like rent a U-Haul, like drive down the street. Probably have to drive pretty far because these are urban cities. It's really hard to actually find a cheap way to get this furniture to your door unless you ship it. And that also involves like putting together everything, so on and so forth. So it's basically a very cumbersome process and also very time consuming as well. So you imagine you just move to a new place, you have a billion things to do, and you just want to basically put together your home. So that's a pretty frustrating experience so far. Another thing is that you can go to garage sales, estate sales, buy secondhand furniture because you want to save a little bit of cost because you spend a lot on your apartment. But that's really hard to find. And also you have to figure out how to transport it. It's not a consistent experience. So this is something that you hope to get lucky in. And that's not something that people want to base their home away from home on. So thinking about that, to actually put together your apartment, the easiest way is if it actually already comes pre-furnished. So that's also interesting. Why don't apartment complexes do that for their tenants? Well, it's really complicated. The apartment complex doesn't actually want to deal with having to furnish things, especially since that's going to be part of how the tenant actually views that apartment. So if it's in a color scheme that someone doesn't like, if there's a piece of pottery that doesn't really sit well with someone, that could actually really hurt the apartment complex's occupancy rate. And that's what they care about as well, because they depend on rent. So the feature that the product that I want to talk about today that I thought of to kind of solve this problem is basically a way for these new grads to actually furnish their apartment and basically rent the furniture. So it's a furniture rental product. And the key thing that differentiates this product than other places where I guess you can rent furniture is, well, first of all, furniture rental is really good, has a few different benefits. So first, for the actual user going after, the new grad, you don't have to worry about like having to figure out where your furniture goes after you leave that apartment. You don't have to worry about splitting the cost with you and your roommate, so on and so forth. So basically how this product will go is people will go find their apartment complex, and along with their rent, they actually can add this on as a part of their amenity. So they would pay a fixed X% of their rent on renting their furniture. So that way you can actually kind of hide the costs in along with the rent. So it's not so obvious to the new grad. And also it's something that you don't have to worry about. It's not another line item that you have to go file or something like that. It just comes along with your rent, happens every month like clockwork. You can make it recurring. So it's really easy for the actual apartment renter, that particular new grad. Another benefit to this, how this is going to work, is that you basically go in, pick a set of basically different pricing schemes. So we'll have different price ranges, different percentage of your rent. So it's really easy. We'll just have 3. So you can basically don't have paralysis by choice. And they will go in, click there. And I think what is really neat about this too is basically part of this is that we'll have different themes that you can choose from. So it's really easy to say, oh, I want this like boho look, or I want a very modern, very sleek, very minimalist look, or I want it to be very colorful, very artsy. So we'll have a couple of different like pre-clustered schemes of furniture items. And this is kind of piggybacking off the popularity of things like Pinterest, things like that have already been established. Instagram's really good at this, basically choosing like a theme to your space. So step 2 would be allowing users to choose their theme. And most of it will actually come preset. His idea is that you don't have to worry about the different little pieces and different furniture items and so on and so forth. But the third step lets you customize it as well. So let's say you can look at if they're different pieces and you can actually switch things out. So we'll allow them to do that. Once they click done, basically this particular product will allow and will basically furnish their apartment. And the key thing here is the relationship between our product to the apartment complexes. So this is something that we want to work with apartment complexes with. So apartment complexes actually are owned by really big holding companies. So you can actually go after the holding company and you're able to target more apartment complexes at the same time than going individual by individual. And you can kind of work with them, especially for the monetization part of this idea as well.
And just to ask a question, Jen, so to clarify, like the pricing scheme, you pay on a rental basis, like does the furniture ever get owned by the consumer, or is it just like rented always? And how does it work if there's kind of depreciation of value on those assets, right? Like the chair might break after the 6th month. Like how would the system handle that, or what are you kind of thinking vaguely? You don't have to get too into the details, but how would you handle that?
Yeah. So so to answer your question, I would say if you think about it, when you actually sign your lease for the apartment, you sign a security deposit as well. So that would be, as we'll take that very similar model, so we don't have to teach our users a new mental model. And that would cover that particular set of furniture for that duration of time. So basically, like you sign a lease for an apartment, you sign your lease also for the furniture as well. And there will be a different security deposit depending on the low tier, medium tier, high tier of pricing choices that we have available.
Gotcha. Cool. Sorry to interrupt. Were you going to go ahead on something, or did you want to kind of move on to, I mean, I think we're doing a great job kind of identifying this product. It sounds really awesome. This idea that I can pick like different styles of my apartment and kind of add on to the apartment in a very similar way. Trade-offs or your areas of risk that you might think, where you might think this product might fail, or what concerns you might have with launching the product. But I also want to make sure that you got through all the things you wanted to say too.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the general skeleton of it. There are also like additional features that we can talk about as well to kind of play up different aspects of it. So for example, different things to add on to it is you can actually basically make this into, like, the full-fledged vision of this is basically you can work B2B with the apartment complexes to go after these new grads who are looking to move in and really have a turnkey lifestyle. Looking at the KPIs we'd be looking at is how long these users actually keep renewing their lease for this furniture rental, and also how much they value the customization of it. So basically, we want to look at customer retention to like offset like the customer acquisition cost of everything, but also how you view engaged users, right? That's something from the very first bit, the top KPIs that this company is looking at. So if you look at engagement, there's different ways. Like obviously renewing the lease is a top way of saying this user is happy, this user is satisfied with the experience of moving into a new city because their housing needs are met. But also, if you think about it, what are different ways we can actually have them engage with this product even beyond just renewing the lease? If you think about it, there are a lot of different ideas. So like, for example, you can bring on like influencer interior designers. Like influencers are a huge, really kind of like a huge new wave of how people do marketing. So actually, to talk about my previous experience, I had worked on my own fashion tech startup back in school. And we really tapped into like the influencer mindset and kind of went after that and how we thought about marketing and talking about our product. So to kind of bring that learning to this product, we can actually use influencers who are big in interior design to design more sets, more customization. So you can kind of have the top influencer in interior design your apartment as a result. So you can really make that personalized. And I think that also adds in a detail-oriented touch where people in this target market want to conform, but also be unique in their own way. So if you think about it, you can also be really detail-oriented. Like this particular interior design influencer includes plants with their with their rental, with their kind of scheme. And plants are a big thing now for this day and age. So it's something where you can kind of reiterate and keep iterating on the different tastes that this target market has, which also allows this vision to scale beyond just new grads, right? If you think about it, if you bring on interior designers who are good at targeting new families, you can really move on beyond just the target market. But that's kind of the 10x, the 100x idea of this furniture rental.
Gotcha. Cool. This is all super great. And some of our viewers are already commenting. So just want to shout out to our viewers. By the way, this is, in case you're joining a little late, this is a PM Lesson live mock interview where we mock interview folks like Jen over here, who's current Microsoft PM, on how to go about answering some of these interview questions. And we're kind of getting towards the end of the interview. So if you do have questions for Jen or just questions in general, post in the comments below so that we can ask them to Jen. But before we jump to the questions, I just have kind of one final question, Jen, for you, which is about, what I alluded to earlier about, so we have this awesome product. I think the influencer angle is really awesome and you have some really key insights and creative insights. But how would what would you be concerned about if you were launching this product? Like what is the risks here and what would you really watch out for? We mentioned some of the KPIs, but what might we be getting wrong here?
Yeah, I mean, I think the part where you have the least data is you're really highly dependent on the apartment complexes. That business-to-business relationship is really key here. And that's actually part of our differentiator, right? Beyond just going after the consumer yourself. Because if you work with apartment complexes, you have the potential to more easily get a key to the unit to put your furniture there before the actually tenant moves in. So that relationship is very much a high-touch relationship, and that needs to be very cultivated in a very careful manner because you want to also integrate with how that apartment has their tenant pay their lease, because that's also a friction point that you want to make sure that you eliminate. You want to make sure that this is also included in how they think about maintenance and facilities. So like you said, if a chair breaks, the apartment complex could send their maintenance person to fix the chair, but you need to negotiate that with the apartment complex. That's kind of how I think about solving those problems that you brought up earlier, but it really does highly depend on how you have the relationship with the apartment complex itself. Gotcha.
Cool. Okay, well, thank you for the interview. We still have some more questions from our commenters, so just a couple that I'd like to go through and kind of answer. And viewers, please, you're more than encouraged to comment and ask. This is the time to ask questions, or even just give us a thumbs up if you like the video, or interact with us in any way, if this was helpful to you, of course. So Jen, the question that Drew is asking here on the Facebook page is that I think a good question, a fair question, is why would people on the higher end of the market lease, lease versus buy, unless they're living in the city for a short time? So, leasing is typically thought about for folks at kind of a set time period, maybe like 1 to 2 years. But, if I'm going to potentially plan on living in this apartment for 4 years or more, would this still be the right product for me? Or how would you think about kind of packaging something different for those users?
Yeah, so I think that's a really good question. And I think the data points I can pull to kind of inform my answer is basically the popularity of apartment complexes over the popularity of condos. And while there are pricing differences, like most people probably can't put a down payment for a condo aside, is that the the benefits of apartment complexes is that you sign leases for 12 months. And from anecdotal evidence and also just like the trend of how new grads now think about their job and career is that most people really think about it in like 2-year time spans. And yes, there are people who are planning on moving to one city and really staying there, but those people are also probably looking at really buying something or buying a condo really shortly after they move. So the target market we're going after are the people who are more unsure in their career. And from what I've seen and read about this particular market and how people view jobs, it's very much the majority of the population. Also, you don't have to move to a different city for the process of moving, of hauling your furniture to a new place, of packing it all up, finding boxes big enough, refinding the boxes, rebuying things getting damaged and moved. All those problems are the same whether you move across the country or down the street because you found a place that has cheaper rent that is like 2 doors down. So people will kind of, for the convenience, we're catering to that. So even if people are going to be staying in the same city, in the same job for multiple years, you may not be necessarily staying in the same place. And since you're a new grad, you probably did your best to do your apartment search, but maybe you didn't consider X, Y, and Z scenario, and you just want to move up and down the street.
Totally makes sense. I think it's fair. I think also it's worth just, there are different types of furniture, right? There's like big furniture that I wouldn't want to move with me, and then there's certain items that totally I would want to buy and like keep with me for a long time too. So I think there's also a difference there too. And then you need to make sure you're targeting. Go ahead, Jen.
Yeah. And also I think this is where like as a tech company, obviously I think everyone talks about this. You have data on the customer behavior, and everyone tries to sell that as a differentiator for their particular startup and try to sell that to, like, you could potentially think about selling that to West Elm, to Wayfair, to IKEA. But I think that data is actually something that you would actually use to inform yourself how you actually think through these different user segments. So you can really iterate on this product idea and business model if you see the data showing you that's the case. So for example, your customer retention really is more than 12 months, which is what I would assume it to be. You would think about maybe if people sign for a longer lease, even if they move, they can kind of carry that lease over if it's within the same city or within the same plan. So this is where you can kind of be a little bit more data driven about it because you have the specific data on a different item. So for example, if you add a feature where someone can switch out specific pieces but still stay in the same plan, you can kind of look at that as an engagement metric. So that's a feature that we can add. So basically, you can lease a gray couch for 6 months, but if someone like switches it to a white couch in the next 6 months, that's another like high touch KPI that you would want to look at as well to see if you want to switch up your plans or extend it or allow people to.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks for that answer, Drew, or thanks for that question, Drew, and thanks for that answer, Jen. Drew, I think we kind of did answer the other part of that question as well, so I want to move on to just one more question before we kind of recap a bit. I'll give some feedback and my thoughts on the answer, which overall I thought was great, by the way, Jen. And then we'll kind of do those 5 tips that Jen mentioned in the beginning. So thanks for reminding us, Manuel. Just wanting to move on to the next question, which Rashmi is asking. And I think this is a question that we can, it's almost like a question outside of the bounds of this interview question, Jen. So we can maybe kind of wrap up this question and kind of talk a little bit more strategy about that question, and then I'll provide feedback. And so this question is, the goal of the question was improve. And so Rashmi's asking, should there be some question to check if a solution already exists? So, like, what would you do if you were in this interview question, you got an improved question? Would you actually think about, like, would you ask the interviewer again, like, what exists already, or how would you think about the existing solutions?
So I think that's actually a really great question. So when I was thinking about this question, I realized it really touches on one of the key core things that you need to deal with when you're working as a PM, like on the job, and that is dealing with ambiguity. And I think that's very much the case for a lot of different types of questions, but I think this, because it was so broad, really emphasized that. So with that, the person that you're talking to, the interviewer or your dev team, when you actually do become a PM, they don't have all answers. So I think you kind of have to kind of ride the fence on asking if there is existing products out there already. I think what you have to do is kind of make assumptions on what the incumbents in the market are. So like, for example, in my answer, I tried to do that in thinking about people can buy furniture. So people can buy furniture from IKEA, Wayfair, so on and so forth. Or people can find furniture at estate sales. You kind of think about what is already out there by how your user does this right now without your product, instead of worrying about actual competitors and things like that. Because it's really hard. Like, I'm sure there is a furniture rental company, but also they do it differently. Like, actually, I think I've looked this up before, or like have seen this on YC, but they don't work with apartment complexes. You don't remove the friction of the rent, like little bits and pieces like that. But I think what you have to care about is what your user behavior is now currently without your product, and what the user behavior is once they use your product. And if you nail that, I think you will kind of take care of the, oh, what if there's already something out there?
Yep, I think that's a great answer. I don't have too much to add to that. I think just like, what are people currently doing? And if people are currently having this problem, then the current solution isn't good enough, and it's not like reaching people enough.
And also what's promising about that, especially when you there are some wicked problems you deal with as a PM. Like, I'm thinking about the project I'm working on now on Azure. And sometimes some days you're like, oh, this is like not solvable. Like, you can't really build something to solve this. But what you have to remember at the end of the day is that users are solving that problem right now. It's just really painful, like really, really painful. But if they are finding a solution, you'll be able to find a way to build a product to make that better for the user, or faster, or more efficient, to make the user more satisfied. So I think that's the light at the end of the tunnel whenever you're in those times.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Okay, so I just want to kind of now take some time. Thanks all for watching. I'm going to take some time to recap and to kind of give some feedback and thoughts about how the interview went, and then we will jump to those 5 tips that Jen mentioned in the beginning. So overall, Jen, this was like a phenomenal interview. You did such a great job. So congrats. Like, this is really, really good and well thought through. I wrote down some thoughts overall. I thought you did a great job with enumerating and summarizing throughout the interview. In PM Lessons course, we also really emphasize that, like, break down the question 1, 2, 3, and then summarize at the end. Like, what did we just say? What did we just discuss? And, every transition point is a good opportunity to say what you just said and then to move on to the point that you're about to make and kind of provide that transition. So I think you did an excellent job with that. I think one area that I thought, we picked new grads as a segment. And I think while your experience is totally a valuable reason to pick that segment, there are even tons of new grads. Like, from a market perspective, I'm kind of talking about the point where we were picking which user we were going with. And like, yes, absolutely, you have this personal experience, but like, there's a huge market, there's a huge need, a lot of confusion for those kinds of users. So I would say that not only is it the personal relationship, but also just the magnitude of the problem. And that could have emphasized even more or justified more why we picked that segment. I loved the home concept, like the idea that like we are trying to give someone a feeling of being home, right? And I think we could have even played that up more in the interview and just kind of tied that back in at multiple times. Like, later on we talked about how the product could be customizable. And, just like a home would be, like a home should feel unique to you. It shouldn't feel like a cookie cutter kind of template of everything else. So tapping into that feeling is really awesome, as like a, kind of laying out the product vision and the product sense that you have there. I thought you did a great job with creativity in this interview too, like really creative ideas, really cool insights. The influencer piece was really interesting. The idea that people want something unique but new, you brought that up. Also, like, I think that's a really key insight. So I thought you did a really sharp job with kind of the philosophy around this problem and kind of the thinking around that problem. And then, yeah, I just wanted to say that the KPI conversation was great also. I love that you tied that back in from the beginning. Like, what are our goals? And then we check at the end, like, are we hitting our KPIs? Are we hitting our key performance indicators? For those of you who don't know, that's KPI. And kind of just making sure, like, okay, yeah, we are accomplishing our goals. This is the point of our whole exercise today. And then lastly, I just thought it was a very conversational, and you had some humor in there, and just like it was a good style also for a PM interview. It wasn't too rehearsed or too kind of like distant from the interviewer. You were kind of communicating. I think you could have maybe asked a little bit more questions to me, or like paused a little bit more and checked in with me as an interviewer. But I also understand this is on a live Facebook interview and kind of a contrived situation overall. So I'm sure in an actual interview it would be a little bit different. Um, and again, to viewers, if you guys are enjoying this video, please like us. It helps encourage us and make sure that we think we're doing a great job. And if you thought this was helpful, it's helpful to us. Jen, did you have any reactions to the feedback or any thoughts about how the interview went for you?
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
this is super interesting because I feel like I've done mock interviews with other people, but like never, I guess, in this setting. And I think every time I do an interview, there's always like so much room for improvement. So even like being a PM for a year and 8 months doesn't mean that it always means I can be better. So I totally think I agree with you. I picked a customer segment that I actually thought was kind of controversial because everyone designs things for millennials nowadays. And that was actually scary for me because I think it would have been naturally more interesting probably to an interviewer, especially considering who the interviewer is. Like if there's someone who wasn't a millennial or someone who like doesn't really like the fact that there are a lot of startups going after this segment that seems that everyone is going after. That was actually scary for me. And that was something that I picked to go with, but I stuck with it because I do feel like there is a market there. But that was actually something where I think there are equally as good answers across the board, and something that I actually think was like a challenge because once after I picked that. So I think that's something to look at and evaluate.
Just to jump in there, like I think one of the good things about what you did is that you really honed in on a specific problem, and it made it more palatable that like you picked the millennial segment as opposed to just like, yeah, we're gonna do a comprehensive like community building platform or something, and it's like, okay, like what does that look like? Like there's 50 of these things out there. Why don't they just use Facebook? But we like came to a big problem and we narrowed it until we got to a really specific stage of a problem, and I thought that was really well done. So that was great.
Thanks, Steven. Yeah, I think that was definitely, I felt like that part took a huge chunk of our interview time. So that leads to the second thing that I think I could have done better. I really think user experience, user interface is so important as a PM. Like that's something in my current project is super critical. That's when you get on the whiteboard with your devs and really draw things out. Like screen 1, the user will select out of these 3 boxes. You do that. Once you click on it, this will pop up. I think I could have really expanded on that. And I think, like, I know we're running out of time, so on and so forth. But I think if you're actually in an interview setting where me and you in the same room with a whiteboard, I would get up there, actually walk you through what this looked like, walk you through, draw a screen for the influencer part, draw a screen for how you switch out the gray couch for the white couch, draw a screen for how you add this to your lease. That I think is very critical to product design and user experience in general. So I think that's something that you all should really hone in on when you do an on-site, when you have a whiteboard, really, really talk that through.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah,
so I think that's definitely another thing. And then also, I love your point about the home away from home. Like when I first brought it up, I realized like, yeah, that's like the emotional connect. You always want to have that emotional connect to talk to you. So the other person, even if they're not anywhere close to that user, like they're not that user at all, they always identify with an emotional connect. And that is true for any product, whether it's business to business, business consumer, something that's really heartfelt, something that's really technical. That, at the end of the day, is what people remember. Like people remember how you make you feel, not what you say, what you do. Same goes for products. So I do wish I kind of went back to that a little bit more because I think that would have been a really good tagline for the future vision part.
Totally. But I mean, overall, Jen, and I think these are great points too, but overall, that was like a rock star interview. I think you did a phenomenal job. Like this super, super good. So just want to emphasize like to all those watching as well, like this is a great model of how to do an interview. And so I want to transition in just a bit, but if you guys want more content, the folks listening want more content like this, check out pmlesson.com for more mock interviews just like this one, where we kind of walk through a mock interview, give feedback, have all these live videos, as well as lots of lessons online about how to think about product management interviews and how to prepare for them. In So if you're watching on YouTube, we're going to be splitting this video now, and the next video will be the video with Jen's 5 tips.